Shadows of blood. Throughout history, rumors of supernatural creatures have lingered at the edges of human consciousness, anomalies dismissed as myths and legends. However, these stories hold a kernel of truth. Hidden in the darkest corners of the world are beings humanity calls monsters, and those sworn to hunt them. These warriors, known as supernatural hunters, have existed for centuries, dedicated to protecting humankind from creatures deemed evil and unnatural. In the early 1600s, in the heart of France, a young preacher named Gabriel Donadieu led one of the most notorious witch hunts. Under his influence, the Protectors de la Nuit, Protectors of the Night, was born, a group of hunters trained to seek and destroy anything supernatural. What began with witches soon expanded to other beings: werewolves, demons, and most terrifying of all, vampires. Gabriel's campaign of purification culminated in an encounter with an entity no one could have foreseen: a Taunus, a creature more dangerous than any he had faced. The beast brought devastation to Gabriel's village and cursed the town with a plague of vampirism, leading to the preacher's untimely demise. Now, centuries later, the Protectors of the Night still hunt these creatures, having refined their skills over generations. Their headquarters, nestled deep in the murky woods of New Orleans, serves as a beacon of defense against the growing vampire threat. And one of their brightest new recruits is Jocelyn Durand. Chapter 1: The New Recruit. The sound of a woodpecker roused Jocelyn from sleep. She blinked groggily at the soft light filtering through the cracks of her tent, adjusting to the world around her. Groaning, she sat up, rubbing her eyes. Another day of training, she thought, standing to dress herself in her hunter's gear. A white tank top, light brown jacket, olive green pants, and worn black combat boots. Once dressed, she tied her raven hair into a loose ponytail, grabbed her crossbow and stake belt, and stepped outside, breathing in the crisp, dewy air of the forest. She wasn't one for early mornings, but there was something serene about the way the sun shone through the canopy of trees, casting the world in a light green hue. Her pace quickened as she made her way to the training grounds, eager to continue honing her skills. As she neared the base, she could see the other hunters already engaged in their drills, preparing for whatever lurked in the forest beyond. Jocelyn entered the armory tent, running her fingers over the familiar smooth wood of her crossbow before hoisting it over her shoulder. Today was going to be different. She could feel it in her bones. "Well, well, look who's early for once," a gruff voice called out behind her. Jocelyn turned to see Hudson Bayard, her captain, grinning at her. His scruffy brown beard barely hid the smirk beneath it. She rolled her eyes, smirking back. "I've been getting better at this whole waking up early thing. You should be proud." Hudson chuckled, shaking his head. "I'll be proud when you finish your drills without looking half asleep. Speaking of which, once you're done, come find me. I've got something important to discuss with you." Jocelyn raised an eyebrow in surprise but nodded. "Sure thing, boss." As Hudson turned and walked away, she couldn't help but wonder what he had planned for her. With renewed determination, she began her training. First up was melee combat, and Jocelyn attacked the training dummies with swift precision. Every hunter was expected to master close-quarters combat, but her true talent lay in the crossbow. She was one of the fastest in the camp, able to reload and fire with deadly accuracy. By the time she landed her third bullseye in a row, a few of her peers were casting envious glances her way. She couldn't help but smile. A little competition never hurt anyone. Chapter 2: A Dangerous Mission. By midday, the sun hung heavy in the sky, and Jocelyn was drenched in sweat. After retrieving her final arrow, she slung her crossbow over her back and made her way to Hudson's tent. Her curiosity piqued. She found him sitting at a cluttered desk, poring over a letter with a furrowed brow. Hearing her approach, he glanced up and motioned for her to come closer. "How'd training go?" he asked casually, though the serious look in his eyes said he had something more pressing on his mind. "Fine. Same as always. What's up?" she asked, leaning against the tent pole. Hudson set the letter down and sighed. I received a message from one of our sister bases this morning. They've lost contact with a group of hunters who were sent to check their usual patrol points. I want you to lead a search party to find them. Jocelyn's heart skipped a beat. Her first mission. She barely kept the excitement out of her voice as she asked, "Finally sending me into the field, huh? About damn time." But Hudson wasn't smiling. His expression remained grim as he spread a map across the desk. "This is serious, Joe. The hunters went beyond the camp's safe zone, and they haven't been heard from in days. I'm not sending you out there to play hero. Your job is to bring them back, alive if possible. Got it?" She nodded, her previous smugness fading. Hudson's tone told her everything she needed to know. This mission was dangerous, and failure wasn't an option. "When do I leave?" she asked. "At dawn. You'll be meeting a team at the trailhead to the other camp. Gear up and get some rest. You'll need it." Jocelyn gave him a firm nod before exiting the tent. Her heart raced with anticipation. This was her chance to prove herself as a true hunter, to show Hudson and the others that she could handle whatever the night threw at her. This is my moment, she thought, and she wasn't about to let anything stand in her way. As dusk settled over the camp, Jocelyn lay in her tent, staring up at the canvas roof, her mind racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. The dark forest, the missing hunters, and whatever creatures might be lurking beyond the safe zone filled her thoughts. She had trained for this, and now it was time to put that training to the test. The shadows lengthened outside, and the forest around her grew still. Tomorrow would be the beginning of something far more dangerous than any drill, and Jocelyn knew that whatever awaited her beyond the safety of the campfire's glow, she would face it head-on. But deep in the heart of the forest, something ancient stirred. The Forsaken Trail continuation. Jocelyn returned to her tent, her mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming mission. The idea of finally being sent on a real mission, even though she wasn't leading, filled her with a mix of excitement and anxiety. She knew Hudson trusted her, but his serious demeanor earlier had shaken her confidence slightly. What kind of danger had those hunters faced beyond the safe zone? And what exactly was lurking in the depths of that uncharted forest? After gathering her gear, a sleek black crossbow, silver-tipped arrows, a stake belt, a compact silver knife, and some extra rations, Jocelyn lay down on her cot. She stared at the top of her tent, listening to the distant sounds of the camp settling down for the night. The crackling of fires, murmured conversations, and the occasional howl of wolves from the forest surrounded her. Sleep didn't come easily. She tossed and turned, her mind unable to shake the eerie silence of Hudson's tent and his sudden intensity. "Tomorrow," she whispered to herself, "tomorrow I prove my worth." Before the sun had fully risen, Jocelyn was already on the move, meeting her group at the designated trailhead. The cold, early morning air bit at her face, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused on the task ahead. Waiting for her was a group of 3 hunters: Colt, a burly man with a thick black beard and a reputation for strength over subtlety; Mira, a swift and deadly archer known for her silent tracking abilities; and Luke, a quiet, stern man who handled explosives and traps with terrifying precision. "Ready for your first big mission?" Colt grunted, adjusting his massive axe strapped to his back. Jocelyn smirked, pulling her ponytail tight. "More ready than you are, big guy." "Enough," Luke cut in, his voice low and serious. "This isn't a competition. We have a job to do. Stay focused." Mira glanced at Jocelyn with a supportive smile. "We'll be fine as long as we stick together." They set off into the thickening woods, the trees gradually becoming more twisted and gnarled the further they went. The sunlight barely pierced the dense canopy above, casting the forest in a dim greenish glow. As they moved deeper, the air grew colder, and the usual sounds of the wilderness, birds, insects, rustling leaves, began to fade. Jocelyn felt her pulse quicken. Something was off. There was a stillness that unnerved her, a silence that felt unnatural. As they passed through a narrow clearing, Luke suddenly raised his hand, signaling the group to stop. Jocelyn's hand instinctively went to her crossbow. "There's something ahead," Luke whispered, crouching low and motioning for them to follow. He pointed to a set of tracks in the dirt, barely visible. "These aren't animal tracks. They're human, but something's wrong." Mira knelt beside him, her brow furrowing. "The footprints are uneven. It looks like they were staggering. Maybe injured." Jocelyn scanned the area, her fingers tightening around her weapon. "Could be. Or maybe they were running from something." Colt stepped forward, his axe ready. "Let's find out." They followed the trail cautiously, weapons drawn, senses heightened. The tracks led them deeper into the forest, until they reached the edge of a dark ravine. A thick mist clung to the ground, obscuring the bottom. "Do we cross?" Mira asked, eyeing the ravine warily. Before anyone could answer, a sudden rustling in the bushes behind them caught their attention. Jocelyn whirled around, her crossbow aimed at the noise. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, without warning, a figure stumbled out from the underbrush, ragged, pale, and covered in blood. "Help me!" The figure rasped, collapsing to the ground. Jocelyn's eyes widened as she recognized the man's tattered uniform. He was one of the missing hunters. Mira rushed to his side, turning him over carefully. "It's Emil," she gasped. "He's still alive." Emil's eyes were wild, darting between the trees as if expecting something to leap out at him. We shouldn't be here, it's coming." "What's coming?" Jocelyn asked, kneeling beside him. But before Emil could answer, the forest around them came alive with movement. The bushes shook, branches snapped, and a deep guttural growl echoed through the trees. "Get ready," Luke shouted, positioning himself near a tree, explosives in hand. From the shadows emerged creatures Jocelyn had only heard about in hunter legends. Their eyes glowed red, their bodies twisted and malformed, barely resembling the humans they once were. Feral vampires, fledglings. Colt roared, swinging his axe at the first vampire that lunged at him, slicing its head clean off. "We've got company." Jocelyn raised her crossbow and fired, her bolt piercing the chest of another fledgling. It screeched and collapsed, black blood oozing from the wound. She quickly reloaded and fired again, her arrows finding their marks with deadly precision. Myra's arrows flew through the air, hitting the vampires with deadly accuracy. Luke tossed a small explosive toward a group of fledglings, the blast sending them flying back into the trees with a deafening boom. But the vampires kept coming, more emerging from the shadows, their eyes glowing with hunger. "There's too many," Mira shouted, her voice strained as she loosed another arrow. Jocelyn's heart raced as she fired bolt after bolt, but it felt like they were being overwhelmed. One of the vampires lunged at her, but before it could reach her, Colt's massive axe came down, cleaving it in two. "We need to fall back," Luke yelled. "Regroup at the ravine." But just as they started to retreat, a new figure appeared at the edge of the clearing. A tall, slender vampire with glowing red eyes and an aura of unmistakable power. Unlike the fledglings, this one moved with grace and confidence, its gaze locked on Jocelyn. "You!" it hissed, its voice low and menacing. "You're the one he's been waiting for." Jocelyn's blood ran cold. Who's been waiting for me?" The vampire smiled, revealing sharp fangs. "Atunus, the king of vampires." Jocelyn's heart pounded in her chest as the realization hit her. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was a trap. And she was the target.